So you've been in Congress for 16 years. You were a 5-term Somerville mayor, one of our most distinguished graduates.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But so it's great. It's great to have you here. So let's start talking some about just how how you made it to where you are today. So let's talk about growing up in Somerville. How did a Somerville kid make it to Dartmouth and BCLaw?
By accident. I often think of myself as having been a geographic ethnic distribution of the day. I don't know. I went to Dartmouth because one of the few good decisions I ever made in my life was that I knew that for me, I lived in Somerville. I lived closer to Harvard Square than most people who live in Cambridge lived to it. And had I gone to any of the local schools at the time, I would have gotten in trouble because all of my friends from Somerville would have been hanging around with me. And actually, it actually did happen to one of my better friends in high school that did go to a local Boston school. It's exactly what happened, and he got in trouble and had to take some time off. So I decided I had to get out of town, and to be perfectly honest, at the time, I don't know what the rules are anymore, but you're supposed to have only applied to one school early decision. I applied to 4.
You're a rule breaker.
Yeah, but at the time, don't forget, everything wasn't computerized, so the schools couldn't find out. And I actually didn't think about it that much. I just did it. And Dartmouth accepted me, and I went.
So Dartmouth always has had this reputation of being a conservative place. Was it like a boot camp for liberals, or whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or what?
I didn't pay much attention to that part of it when I was there. I wasn't politically active. I wasn't involved. The only political activism I took part in was in my freshman year. I had some cultural differences, having been a city kid and now finding myself in the middle of the woods with most kids who didn't have backgrounds similar to mine. And I was having some difficulties making that adjustment. And anyway, I was having some academic difficulties at the time. And for me, it got to be fortunate that we shut the school down in the spring of 1970. And
is that over the Vietnam War? Or
it was over the shootings at Kent State. All the schools in the country shut down, and had they not shut down, I probably would have flunked out of school. And instead, I got 3 incompletes and got to go home, clear my head, and come back to school and do a better job for the remaining 3 years. And I wasn't paying any political attention, except I did participate in shutting the school down. But that may have been motivated more by my own personal situation than it did by international events. But so at the time, that was before Dartmouth had a reputation at the time. At least I wasn't aware of it being very conservative. That kind of happened soon after I left. It was relatively non-political, at least as my experience was anyway.
Then you came home and came to BC Law School pretty much right away.
Okay, yeah, I came right away. Lots of different reasons, but then I would have been in the class of 76. I came for a few weeks and I realized I needed some time off. And the school was kind enough to give me a year deferral. And I took that year for deferral, and actually within 3 weeks of leaving school, I realized I'd better get my butt back there next year. I actually tell this story all the time. My friends from college had all gone to Atlanta. They were all having a lot of fun. And I wanted to join them, and of course, I had no money. And so I had to work some part-time with Manpower. I don't even know if Manpower is still around, that kind of temporary work. You go and they tell you where to go. At the time, so I went in and I got a job, and they gave me a job over at the Christian Science Center in the lunchroom of the Christian Science Monitor. And so I went there, now being a Dartmouth grad and being law school enrolled, recently passed enrollee. And I was washing dishes for the whole day. And at the end of the day, the manager of the cafeteria came in and said, "You know, kid, you were the best dishwasher we have ever had. You stick around here, you got a future." And that was the first, I realized, maybe I made a mistake. And so I came back. And
well, you can always fall back on that even now, probably.
I'm actually still pretty good at it.
So why BC? Tell us some
lots
about
of different reasons. I thought it was time to come home. BC was an excellent regional school at the time. It's now bigger than that. I'm sure I couldn't get into BC today. And it was time for me to come home. I made a decision that most of my life would probably be spent in the Boston area. My family, my friends were here, and I thought I was mature enough to get over the problems that had sent me away. And that's why. It was the best law school that I had available to me, then I wanted to go there.
So, and there were a lot of other of your fellow students in your cohort at that time that ended up in public service. Like John Kerry was here at that, and were you friends with John Kerry?
Not really, no. John was an adult by that time. He had already gone to Vietnam, had already done all the national and international stuff. I was just a stiff in the back of the room, trying to stay awake. So.
Did you, more or less?
After my first year I did. No, my first year I made similar mistakes I made in college. Didn't really take it as seriously as I had to. Honestly, academics, everybody's different, and I don't mean to brag about it, but I've always been okay at academics. And when I don't feel challenged, my reaction at that time as a young man was to be just the opposite of what I should have done. When I wasn't challenged, I would just shut down and just ignore everything. And that's what I did here as well. But by my second year, that's when I decided, honestly, to start taking courses that were much more difficult, out of my comfort zone, and therefore challenging me more, and I got better at it.
Do you mind telling the story that you told me before about the last time you were in the dean's office?
I'll tell it, but it was criminal law, my second year. And I was taking it very seriously, as I said. I think it was the first semester of the second year. And at the end of the year, I'd studied hard, I worked hard, and I felt comfortable in knowing the material. Just before the end of the exam, the professor was telling us, what's coming up. And he made a very big point of telling us he did not want the dump truck theory. And he explained the dump truck theory is when I ask you a question, answer the question. Don't tell me everything you know. I took him seriously. On the exam, there was a question that was like 2 or 3 questions. It wasn't, but a lot of detail, each one of them, obviously. And in one of the questions, somebody died, but it was clear there was no murder. So I didn't discuss a potential of a murder, and I got a D. And
we don't give Ds anymore, really.
You don't? Well, maybe I got the last one. Well, so I went to see the professor, and I said, look, I thought I knew this stuff. Now I'm nervous because I thought I was okay. I mean, it's one thing knowing you don't know it. It's another thing thinking you know it. And he went through the whole exam, and it turns out, he said, well, you're the only one in the class who didn't discuss the murder. I said, well, there was no murder. He said, you're right. There was no murder. I said, but you told us not to do the dump truck theory. He said, well, everybody else discussed it. I said, well, then you should mark everybody else down because they didn't listen to you. I listened to you. And with that, he said, well, okay, I'll give you a chance. You can retake the exam, but I won't give you higher than whatever, P- or whatever it was. And I said, no, I'll take the D. So I have a D on my, but after that, I will guarantee you, I gave every professor after that the dump truck theory. Anytime anybody asks me what time of day it is, I tell them not just the time, but when the watch was made, what time, what's everything. And I did fine.
A theory of time.
Everything. Right. Everything I could think of. And honestly, I actually liked it better not giving the dump truck theory, but I learned the lesson the hard way.
So what do you think it is about, being a little more serious, what do you think it is about BC law that tends to attract public service-oriented people, I mean, then and now?
It's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to tell in general. I can only say for me. Again, I was a local guy doing local things, and it's hard for me to tell. But for me, it had a lot to do with my upbringing, the way I was always raised to believe, and I think BC was part of that. That if you're lucky enough to have something, you have an obligation as a member of society to share that, not to give it all away, but to share it. And for me, I was lucky enough that God gave me a brain, gave me a decent family, gave me some good chances to be able to use that intelligence in a way that could do something. And for me, that means using that to help people. And there's a lot of ways to do that. For me, it turned out to be public service.
There must have been a political awakening about this time too, right? Because didn't you run for mayor almost immediately after you graduated from law school?
I graduated law school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, law school was also a way for me to avoid having to make that big decision, you know. And I graduated law school and I still didn't make that big decision, so I was practicing local law a little bit just because I thought I should. By the way, I hated it, but I thought I should do it, and I decided to run for, my wife is also from Somerville. We had moved back to Somerville. We lived down the street here, so we only had one car, and she was at graduate school at the time, so she took the car to school, and I would walk here. So we decided to move back to Somerville, and we did, and I decided to run for alderman, city councilor over there, and I won. And after 2 years there, I decided, you know what, this is not good. There were things going on that I didn't like, that I didn't appreciate, and I decided for me it was up or out, and I ran for mayor. I lost, and in hindsight, I think it was probably good for everybody, good for the city and good for me that I lost. And I thought I was actually done with politics, if you want the truth. I thought I would then go on and become an adult at some point and go on and make money. It didn't quite work out.
It's interesting that you said that you didn't like practicing law. I practiced law and didn't really like it either. I think that's the experience of a lot of people who practice law. A lot of people love it. A lot of people...
I have a son who does it. He loves it.
A lot of people don't love it. Do you think, I mean, this is a little far afield, but do you think the legal profession is in trouble? I mean, do you think law schools are in trouble? Law schools are declining in enrollment, applications are down. Why?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers. I mean, it depends how you look at it. I mean, I didn't look at law school as going to auto mechanic school. I wasn't learning a trade. I was learning how to think. And that ability can and should be used in 1,000 different ways. Law is one of them. It is not the only one. And I haven't practiced law in the traditional sense of the word very often, but my training here really, I use it all the time. And it wasn't solely on its own. It was built upon all the other blocks I had, but it was the first time that I was able to take all my intellectual ability and actually put it to work doing something in a real sense of the word. And it helped me do that. I don't think I could have done it very effectively without the legal training. If you look at it as auto mechanic school, there's only so many jobs to be lawyers, and things get tougher. I don't know how all that stuff works. But if you look at it as an opportunity to potentially become a lawyer, but also an opportunity to open your mind to doing 1,000 other things, it's still, in my opinion, it was a fantastic education for me.
So let's go back to you running for mayor. So then there was a while you were in private practice. You worked on the Hill here in Boston, Beacon Hill, as a lawyer for the State House, and then you ran for mayor again and won.
I won for mayor. Well, actually, I ran for alderman at large and won that. Again, it was a part-time job, but that was different. My motivations then had turned very personal. I grew up in Somerville, like I said. My wife grew up in Somerville, and Somerville then, for anybody who knows it today, they don't look anything alike. In Somerville in those days was a very hard-scrabble community, and I laugh about it, but the truth is, in my generation, the measure of success for everybody I grew up with was how quickly you could move out. And I am the only person that I know of my age that grew up there that's still there. Everybody else moved out to the suburbs as soon as they could. And I had a child, and my wife and I found us bringing our child outside of the city to go to playgrounds for the first time in my life. Now, having grown up there, I never really concerned myself or noticed it, but then when I became an adult, not only I noticed it, I realized it had been that way my whole life. There were no swings. Every basketball court had broken glass. There were no basketball nets, on and on and on. And it was because I believe that people learn to accept the things they can't see beyond. And I think my community had learned to accept this. It's just the way it was, and don't complain about it because it's not going to matter anyway. And being the less than compliant person I was and still am, I made a decision that that was totally unacceptable, and I wouldn't accept it, and I would fight it, and I did, and that's what drove me back into politics, and what continues to drive me today, the same general concept. I refuse to accept the way the world is if I find it to be inappropriate.
I think Somerville seems to be thriving. I mean, I live just across the border in Cambridge, and I go to Somerville to eat or to take my kids to playgrounds.
We worked hard to do that. yeah, it's true. We worked hard to do that. And the problem is that when you, at least as I've found, it was a struggle to do that. Every single day there was a battle to turn it around. And once it turns it around, you can't fine-tune it that much. You can't say, we're going to turn it off now. Once it gets going, it becomes its own. And I think there's only two choices when it comes to government. It's either up or down. And some of it went down for a long time, and no one bothered to try to struggle to change it. And now it's going up. And I honestly, if I could, in my perfect little world, I would have toned it down a little bit more because it has become too expensive for the very people I was working to help for them to live there. And that's not a good thing. So it's become imbalanced the other way.
And now as Congressman, it seems like you take special pride in helping Somerville, like the new T-stop at a Assembly Place, I guess it's now called.
I don't know.
It's nice, that new development they have over there. So that seems to be a real source of pride for you.
I take pride in helping, in focusing attention on things that people tend to overlook. And again, as I said, it's the communities that I represent that most other people, including the residents themselves, often will look beyond and just accept it as is. Well, it's always been that way. Well, it doesn't make it right. It means, okay, it means it's going to be tough to change, but you got to change this. And, well, yeah, it'd be great, but. No buts about it. It doesn't mean I lose way more than I win, but I focus. It's easy to focus on the stuff that everybody wants. That's the easiest thing in the world. It's harder to focus on stuff that no one else is paying attention to.
Do you miss being a mayor?
There are days. Sure, being mayor, it's very tangible what you can do. It's very visible, very measurable, and you can wrap your arms around it. But at the same time, everybody's different. I'm a very hands-on guy. I knew everything that was going on every minute of every day. As a mayor or as a governor, you can never shut it off. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows where you live. And that's fine. But for me, I won't say I don't tolerate fools. I do, but there comes a point. And it means for me, I'm a very confrontational person. If I need to I'm going from point A to point B, I'm happy to talk with you for a long time to try to get you to come along, and I'll even amend it. Well, maybe we'll go to C instead of B. But at some point, if you're in the way, I'm going around you, through you, over you, or under you. And that it's good if we agree, but if we don't agree, you get very upset. So for me, being mayor was literally as close as you can get to a political fist fight every single day. And that gets tiring.
So you went to Congress to relax?
Maybe. No, I actually just, it was time for a change. The congressional seat opened up, and I thought I'd take a shot at it. And honestly, I didn't know if I could win. Nobody thought I could win. You take any look at any of the news clippings when I first decided to get in, I was nowhere in the first tier by anybody's measure. And it was just a way, if it didn't work out, I probably would have left being mayor soon anyway. So for me, it was just like anything else. You take an opportunity presents itself. If you take a shot, you take a shot. And that's all it was. It wasn't a plan.
Right. So what do you love about the job? What do you hate about the job?
Now? I love being at the table to discuss important issues. What do I hate about the job? I don't hate much about the job, except for the general public's lack of understanding of how the system works and how it has always worked. They think you can just, don't get me wrong, too many members of Congress encourage that thinking. Somehow, I'm going to run for Congress, I'm going to solve all your problems. Oh, you are. That's very good. I hope you're right. Unfortunately, you go to Congress, you're one of 435 members. You are the junior member, And I now do it. You know, the new guy comes in the back seat. You're the congressman from where? Good for you. Talk to me in about 4 or 5 years when you learn where the men's room is. And that's not unusual. That's true in any big organization. We're a big organization of 435 members. Most of the members are strong-willed, capable, thoughtful, intelligent people. They're not going to just open the door for you. Oh, so thank God you're here, Mike. Could you solve this little Middle Eastern problem we have? So, I don't know. I mean, there's really nothing I don't like about it, except that I have to continuously remind people that, you know, the world doesn't end at 128. It doesn't even end at the New England border. You know, it actually goes all the way to Texas and Alabama and places that most of us have never been and don't understand. But I will guarantee you, they have never been here and they don't understand us either.
I think it's easy to forget how big and diverse this country is, right? And how different people are, how the different mindsets, different perspectives, and you've got to deal with it every day if you're butting heads with somebody who's has.
And I don't mind doing that. I actually like it. If you want the truth, I enjoy debates on important issues. I really do. I actually dislike the floor speeches because if you look at it on TV, watch C-SPAN anytime you want, 99.9% of the members are just reading their speech. They're not debating. They're not talking to anybody. I actually prefer. We did a thing recently at the Transportation Committee. We had a special little committee on public-private relationships, and we did all roundtables. I don't want hearings. We just talked. And it was one of the best experiences I've had. We didn't come to any massive, great conclusions, but we actually talked about an important issue in a thoughtful manner. And people who came to the table thinking we were going to seriously disagree on basic philosophy, we ended up agreeing on something. We actually had a bipartisan report that was pretty good. And I just wish, and again, with a big system like that, it's hard to do. But for me, that's the part of it that I like. I like it a lot. And I think it's important. You have to have people at the table pushing.
Do you feel like this most recent round of new members from really conservative districts, the Tea Party caucus, are they less willing to be open to your arguments, less willing to compromise than your experience had been previously?
Well, you have to understand, most of them ran for office with the public promise. It's not a secret. They publicly promised not to compromise. They think that is a virtue. I personally think it's a virtue somewhere, but not in politics. And many of them have learned. I will tell you that there are many Tea Party people that I like them. I have no problem with people being passionate about their beliefs, even if I disagree with them. I actually prefer it. But I also need you to be open-minded to understand that, okay, you're passionate about yours, so am I. And you have a choice. We either do nothing because we're both stick to our passions, or we try to work it out. And I'm more than happy to try to work it out. I think a lot of them are coming around to understanding that a little bit more. So that doesn't bother me. I've often said that in politics, it is almost never my enemies who bother me. It is usually my friends. And it's my friends because too many of my friends think, well, we're right. Why can't they just listen to us? Because we're right. Like, guys, it's a street fight every day. Being right is a beginning. It is not an end. And the end is finding a way to implement that right somehow, and that is politics. And I get frustrated when people want to get into politics, yet don't want to be political. It's like, okay, go sit in the corner and get out of the way.
It does seem like Congress is less popular now than ever. I mean, in terms of popularity or the trust measures, I think a congressperson is trusted less than car salespeople at this point. I think
I have never sold cars.
It would be a step up maybe in terms of trust. Nurses, I think, are the most trusted profession. Like 82 cars salesmen are at 9, and Congress people are at 8. Do you blame people for that? Do you think that's
wrong? Lack of trust, that's silly. I mean, but liking Congress? I'm a member of Congress. I don't like them. I mean, it's asking me do I like everybody in this room? I don't know most of you, and I'm sure I like most of you, but I'm sure there's some I won't like. And people do it all. It is not new. that people say the legislative body, Congress, the State House, City Hall, I hate the legislative body, but my guy, he's different. And it's been going on from day one. It's going on now more than ever because we have such a significant divide. But that alone doesn't matter to me.
Do you think the divide is in part because so many districts are safe? I mean, since you've initially won, you've never gotten less than 80% of the vote. You're as safe as...
That's not true. I am safe from a Republican. I am not safe from another Democrat. And I don't mean to be rude about it, but just the letter after your name doesn't mean much to me if it's not my name in front of that letter. And therefore, what defines safe? I mean, safe from a D versus A? Yeah, probably. But that's not safe.
But in general, most districts are pretty safe in the sense that people get reelected.
Party, but that's not new. That has been around for a long time. And I argue, people say, well, all you want to do is get reelected. Like, yeah, you're right. Anybody here want to give up your job voluntarily? You want to, and not just give up your job, but give it up in a very public way. To have 51% of everyone you have ever met say, we hate you. No one wants that. So yes, of course I want to get reelected. And by the way, getting reelected is a way for people to say, you're doing okay, Mike. So I find that to be hilarious, that that's a bad thing that I want to get reelected. Number one. Number two, as far as trust goes, I think people trust me. That doesn't mean people agree with me. I've been married for 40 years. My wife and I don't agree on everything. That's not the point. Right. The point is that, okay, I agree with you on 70%, 80%, and the rest of it, I trust you to do okay. You know, you won't break anything. And I think that's the most you can ask out of life. And most people are like that when they come down to the individual vote that they take. Does that mean that I like the members of Congress from, Alabama? I like them fine, but I wouldn't vote for any of them. And why? Because we are so far off the mark, it's just not possible.
Right. I guess the argument would be if more districts were purple as opposed to red or...
You would have new members of Congress every 30 seconds. You'd have no stability, no one who knew anything about the past. The average member of the House, I haven't looked at it for a few years, but for a long period of time, the average length of time spent in the House of Representatives is 8 years. 8 years. And yes, you get some members who are there for 30 years. And yes, you get some members there who are 2 years. The average is 8. I think that's pretty good. It takes 2 to 3 years to get to know anything about anything. I spent my first 2 years in Congress. I was a member of the minority party. I basically met everyone, got to know them. Why? I wasn't asking anybody out for a date. I wasn't asking anybody out for a drink. I needed to know who they were so that when I went to ask you to help me get money for Massachusetts to do whatever, I wasn't just asking a stranger. I'm asking my friend whom I know your wife, I know your kids, I know your district, I know something about you, and you know me. And yes, I'm a lefty liberal, you're right, ha ha ha, you're a right-wing conservative. But guess what? This isn't a liberal conservative thing. This is money for research to cure cancer. Can you help me? And guess what? In life, in politics, it's oftentimes based on pure relationships. What's right or wrong about curing cancer? Is it a liberal thing? Is it a conservative thing? No. It's a matter of priorities. And I get hit every day, every member of Congress, every day with 100 things, all of which are important. Just sticking to cancer. Which is more important, curing cancer or curing heart disease? Which one? The answer is they're both important. And you know what's the most important? The one that I think of now. That's the one that works. So my job is trying to move those agendas. I can't get somebody to cure cancer who wants everybody to die from cancer. I can't change people's minds on abortion. That's done. And that's not what we work on most of the time. Most of the time we're working on issues that are not deep philosophical issues to individual members. And so therefore for me, making a district purple in and of itself doesn't mean anything. It also presumes that everybody who's ever done the job is terrible at it. Anybody know any profession that counts as? Should every law professor be replaced every 6 years?
Absolutely not.
There we go.
It's important to have life tenure for a law professor.
I'm trying for that life tenure.
You have to become a judge or a law professor. So now you've done a lot of work recently with congressional ethics. Now, so you're in favor of other oxymorons like English cuisine and jumbo shrimp?
Well, yeah, I love jumbo shrimp. To me, no one, I want to go back to what you said earlier. Trust in politicians is important to me. That doesn't mean agreeing with them. It means to know that people are not there just simply padding their own life. And I know, and when you get 435 members, again, all of us have to live on the edge. You don't get elected to Congress by sitting in the back row. You have to be in the front row on the edge of your seat, pushing every day for a long time. It's the personality that it takes. And when you do that, some people cross the line. Sometimes it's accidental. More often than not, it's accidental. But on occasion, you get somebody who's crossed the line dramatically. It happens everywhere. And the problem is, in my life, when it happens to another member of Congress, you read about it on the front page of the paper. You hear about it, a lawyer who steals some client's money. When's the last time you saw that in the front page of the paper? Yet it happens every day. And that's true about priests doing bad things. It's true, every profession has people that do bad things. So do we. For me, it is important, to the best of my ability, that people know that when bad things happen, they will be addressed in an appropriate manner. That doesn't mean everybody's guilty. It means if a member of Congress breaks the rules, they will be dealt with in an appropriate manner. And honestly, since I got involved in ethics, 5, 6 years ago now, 7, 8 years ago, you don't hear too much about the ethical concerns of members of Congress. Individual members still have problems, but not the whole Congress. And that could change, but at the moment, I'm real proud of the success we had on some of those things, and it has worked. Again, it doesn't mean we get rid of all the problems. You're never going to get rid of the problems. But it means that the people who watch these things, not the average person on the street, because they don't, but the people who watch these things are comfortable that the process is working, that we are policing our own. That's important. And I think, again, it hasn't really helped with our public perception, but at least on that perspective it has.
But there may be a lag between, there's always a lag between what's real and what the reputation shows. So let's talk some about specifics and some policy. So, I mentioned before, I think a few years ago, maybe a decade ago, I think you were asking a bunch of law professors what they thought about the Bush administration wiretapping at the time, and I was one of the people who asked. I wrote up some letter. I'm sure you got a bunch of letters, but we would have been surprised if we had been asked if we were still facing that question today, and yet here we are in a sense, right?
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
So we would have thought that a Democratic president coming in would have been more careful with executive power and the like. But it seems like you're just as skeptical of this president's assertion of executive power as the last one.
Look, I'm a big Obama supporter, but on this issue, he's been dead wrong from day one and hasn't done anything good about it, as far as I'm concerned. It's been one of my, as I said earlier, I actually think those of us who are given more by luck and circumstance and genetics and religion, however you want to measure it, we owe more. And that includes lawyers. There is no one who has ever graduated a law school who isn't an intelligent person. Everybody, everyone here, you're intelligent. God gave you a gift. I think you have an obligation to use it. Not the least of which is to speak up when something terribly wrong has happened. And in my opinion, the Constitution, and again, people can disagree, I get that. But I talked to very few people who thought that it is constitutional for the U.S. government to be spying on its own people. A handful of people would defend it, and I respect it. I just disagree with it. The vast majority of people that I know in the legal profession in any category, from constitutional law professors to people who took constitutional law, agreed this is egregious. And yet the entire legal profession pretty much remains silent. And to be perfectly honest, for me, I've told the ABA this, they've gotten better with it since then, I was both angry and embarrassed as a lawyer that the rest of the legal profession didn't stand up as a whole and just scream about it. Not about whether we should or should not change the Constitution or find laws around it, but that violated the law. Violated the Constitution, not the law. The spirit and the letter of the Constitution, in my opinion, and I still believe that today. And It still bothers me. I think lawyers have a higher obligation to use both their intelligence and their training to defend what America is supposed to be about. And it's not just about making money. It's also about the ideals of the individual. And I think that's what this deals with.
So I've been an Obama supporter since even before he announced for his candidacy back in 2007. But I've been really troubled by his assertion of executive power, especially with his use of military might and the like in Libya, his threat to use it in Syria, and it sounds like you've said similar things too.
I don't blame for the concentration of executive power. I don't blame Obama. That is a normal human reaction that, again, anyone who wants to be president has to be the alpha male, female of the thing I talked about earlier, the aggressive on the front lines. It's normal to accumulate power. It's normal. Everybody does it. Abe Lincoln did it. I mean, what's new? What's not normal right now, I think we are in a low point of Congress balancing that power. Congress has willingly allowed it to happen for any number of reasons over a period of time. It didn't happen overnight. You talked about Libya. I was one of the few people that actually sued the president, and I am a supporter, but on this he was wrong. And it doesn't mean that we should or should not have been in Libya. It means that no president should be able to shoot missiles in an independent country without congressional authority. And, I wouldn't have voted yes, but I think Congress would have, and that would have been fine. I mean, I wouldn't have liked it, but it would have been constitutional. And I don't think there's any debate about what, when you shoot a missile at an independent country, I think that's an act of war. I don't think you could argue that one. So it's the one thing that I've agreed with my very conservative friends on, is that the usurpation of power into the executive over the last, they want to blame Obama for everything. I don't. George Bush did it. Bill Clinton did it. Ronald Reagan did it. I did it as mayor. Any governor would do it. Any mayor would do it. It's natural. But the whole idea, the whole American system is built on a legislative body being able to pull that back. And I would hope, I'm looking forward to Congress pulling that back. And again, it's not an anti-Obama statement. It wouldn't matter if my mother were president. I would love her, but I would disagree with her on this.
And you voted against the authority to arm and train the Syrian rebels too.
Yeah.
Say a bit about that, if you would.
That had nothing to do with the constitutional stuff. That had
Right.
to do with a very simple idea. I don't know. There are days I think I'm the only person that remembers we just spent $25 billion arming and training another Middle Eastern country called Iraq. How'd that work out? Not too well. We trained them much better than we're going to be able to train these rebels. And we gave them much better arms, and right now all those arms we're blowing them up because they're now taken over by our enemies. And it just amazes me to think that we're going to be able to train a force that has already been defeated by ISIS on the battlefield for the most part. Every estimate I've heard runs from 10 to 30,000 ISIS fighters versus a maximum of 5,000 non-ISIS Syrian opposition fighters. How are you going to get a force of 5,000 to defeat a force of 10 to 30,000? And it'll take a year to 18 months to train them at best. And then you have to presume that training will result in something better than the training of the Iraqi army. All of that defies logic to me. And therefore, I'm not opposed to taking military action if it's appropriate. I actually support the president's use of air power at the moment. And I would consider the use of military force. I'm not for it at the moment, but I'm not saying no. It's just to pretend to arm the Syrian rebels is going to do something wonderful is ridiculous. And by the way, I must be the only person that remembers that a year ago, the very same people making the most noise in favor of, we have to train the Syrian opposition, they said it a year ago. It's not new. Anybody missed the fact that ISIS was part of that rebel force a year ago? We would have been training and arming them. How does this work? It's a nice, easy, comfortable thing to do that is, in my opinion, absolutely guaranteed to result in nothing good. So why play the game? If we're going to get involved militarily, let's do it, or at least have that discussion. And if we're not, then don't.
Looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? The ISIL is now, it looks like they're on the verge of taking over Kobani, I think is the name of the city right on the Turkish border. You can see the fighting from Turkey. The Kurdish fighters in that city are being overwhelmed. and that gives ISIL control of that if not control, a lot of influence along that border. It's going to get bad.
ISIL won't go into Turkey. Turkey won't stand for it. Again, everybody wants to put this American Civil War mentality on the whole thing, that there's two sides, one wearing a blue uniform, one wearing a gray uniform, and they're going to do stand-up battles, and white will win. Everybody will live happily ever after. That's not the situation here. You've got 20 different sides, all of whom hate each other and have hated each other for 10,000 years and have been killing each other for 10,000 years. The Turkish prime minister last week basically said, for us, the PKK is as bad as Al-Qaeda is to the Americans. PKK is the Kurdish rebel force that has made attacks into Turkey over the last 15 years. So the Turks have no love whatsoever for the Kurds. Anybody who thinks they're going to go to their rescue doesn't know the region, doesn't know the recent history. And I'm not talking about history from 10,000, it's actually maybe 10,000 years ago, I don't know. This is recent history. If you remember, Turkey invaded Iraq 2 years ago, I think it was, only for the purpose of chasing Kurds. Now, again, I'm not saying who's right, who's wrong. I'm saying it's a reality. And to pretend that the reality somehow can be suspended because we're right is the problem. And I think that this whole region, people have to stop thinking about it as if, this is Cambridge fighting Somerville. It's not.
Cambridge would totally win that fight.
Nowadays, not in the old days.
So let's talk some about politics, maybe even presidential politics. So it looks, if you were advising the Republican Party,
give up, surrender.
Yeah, short of that, who do you think it would be their strongest presidential nominee?
I'm only going to answer this because nobody's going to listen to me, so that's fine. I would say some moderate Republican, a Jeb Bush type of Republican, a Rob Portman type of Republican. I personally light candles hoping that they nominate Ted Cruz. I want Ted Cruz. I want Chris Christie. I want some loudmouth, on the edge of the seat guy, so that my voters will make unequivocal distinction between their view of the world and ours, as opposed to someone who may share too much of their views, but presents it in a much less offensive manner. So for me, I hope they nominate the most offensive, brazen, outspoken, right-wing person they can find.
And they have plenty of choices on that front.
Yes, I do. I hope they all beat each other up for an awfully long time.
Do you think Romney will run again?
I have no idea. Which Romney?
Well, I was thinking of Mitt, but even there may be...
Which Mitt Romney? There's several.
Right.
The one that we elected as governor, or the one that we got as governor, or the one that ran for president? There's at least three that I know of.
And I think the new Romney might be yet a different one.
May well be.
If he came back into the race. And how about on the Democratic side? Hillary Clinton is the presumptive nominee.
I think that's probably true. And I have mixed emotions about whether that's good or bad. I actually do believe that a good test is not a bad thing. And personally, I think she'd make a decent president, but I wouldn't mind seeing some new blood too. But again, my definition of new blood is not the same as everybody else's. I'm not the guy who wants the nice, new, shiny object. And we have a tendency to do that. I am in the only profession, and I'm not even supposed to call it a profession because it's a bad thing to be a professional politician. But I'm in the only profession where people keep getting in saying, my whole qualification to do this job, I've never done it before. Go ahead, for you guys in law school, you go ahead and you go to some big law firm and you tell them, I've never done this stuff before. I want to be a partner. Go ahead, see how that works out. And yet we do it. So that's not what I mean by new blood. I want some new blood that has been tested, preferably in the street. And not because I don't want Hillary. Hillary I think would be fine. And I wouldn't mind if she won a primary in that situation. But I would like to see a contest of ideas and everything. I don't like the idea of anointing anybody.
Right. I was going to ask whether you think the party would be stronger if she had an opponent in the primaries.
I think if she had legitimate opponents, if she won a contest, good. And I may end up being with her. I don't know. But if she, I think it would make her stronger. I think it would make the party stronger. Yes, I do.
So she probably needs to be pushed from the left. Maybe. What are you doing?
Won't be me unless I hit the lottery. And if I hit the lottery, I'm not running for that. I'm running for the beach.
That's a good point. But don't you think you would have beaten Scott Brown in 2010 if you had won that primary?
I don't know. I mean, look, I appreciate the question. I've had an awful lot of my friends tell me that, and I mean, you cannot put your name on a ballot ever if you don't think you can win. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. I never have. And I've lost my fair share of elections, and I've won my fair share of elections, but I've never once put my name on the ballot, thinking not that I would win, but I had a path toward victory. And yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. My big concern about my own self is that I scare people, and I know I do. I particularly scare suburbanites because I'm a little too direct. I'm a little bit too much from the street. I swear too much, probably. I'm a little too gruff around the edges, and my good friends are always telling you, Mike, what's the problem? Just smooth out. Like, I don't want to smooth out. I am rough and ready, and I am who I am, and that's just life. And actually, I made that decision when I got into politics full time, when I stopped doing the legal stuff that I was doing. When I cut my salary in half and doubled my hours, I said, you know what, I'm going to do this on the condition that I can be me. And I still am going to do that. And I try to shave the edges a little, but not too much. And that being the case, I don't know whether I would have beat him or not. I would have given him a hell of a run because I've never lost an election because I got outworked. I got lost an election for 1,000 reasons. It's not one of them. I don't get outworked.
A lot of people were pushing you to run for governor.
Yeah, well, I thought about it, and I would make a great governor for one term. At the end of that term, probably 80% of the people would want to run me out. Or they would love me. When I ran for mayor, the local paper, the week before the election, before the final election, they actually endorsed me. It was the weirdest endorsement I've ever seen. It basically said, he's crazy, and if he wins, he could really mess this city up. But if he wins and he does all the things he says he's going to do, he could really make this city better. And the whole thing was, higher risk, higher reward. And that was the title of the editorial. I actually think they were right, in the sense that I'm not in this just to be in it, and I wouldn't do anything any other way. If I were governor or anything, not just any, if I was dog catcher, I would try to change the world to make it better, and I would do it any way that it took. And I am a politician, and I would do it politically as I would do it ideologically. Ideology doesn't get you anywhere if you don't know how to move it from A to B. And I'm pretty good at moving it from A to B. And I think my ideology and my philosophy is okay, but that's for others to judge.
I was going to ask you to give a pitch to the law students here about why public service is a worthwhile profession, as opposed to going and making a gazillion dollars
There's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, you can do both, actually, if you want the truth. It's kind of what my father told me, and I didn't listen to him. And kind of what I tell my kids. You can be in public service and still make a lot of money. Not in public service, go be in private practice. But that doesn't mean you go home at 5 o'clock at night. It means when you're done working, go teach a little league team. What's wrong with that? Go be involved in politics. What's wrong with that? Again, you have something to offer. And if you want to tell me, oh, geez, I worked hard and I have to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, look, I've done it all now at this point in my life, and I will tell you that no one works harder than a good politician. No one works harder than a good politician. Why? My day, not every day, and I'm at a different point in my life, but in the middle of a campaign, especially, your day starts at minimum 7 o'clock in the morning, and I mean out the door by 7 o'clock in the morning, and you're not home until 10 o'clock at night. And I'm not kidding. And if you're not doing that, you really shouldn't be on the ballot, if you want the truth. Because, and I don't mean you can do whatever you want, but then I don't think you have the right to then ask anybody for money. You don't have the right to ask anybody to work. How could you have the audacity to ask somebody to do something for you that you wouldn't do yourself? I want you to hold the sign of the rain, but I'm sorry, I have to go get my fingernails done. You can't do that. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. And so for me, I don't think there's anything more rewarding in the world than knowing when you look back, even back a day, a year, a decade, or a lifetime, that you've done something to make the world better. And look, if you can cure cancer, go do it. It's not always that. Sometimes it's just picking up a playground. Sometimes it's teaching a kid after school. I don't care what it is. If you can't do that, honestly, I think you're nothing but selfish. I'm sorry, I just think you're selfish. And you can't do it every day. You can't do it 24 hours. I don't expect people to go into public service directly all the time. That's asking a lot. You guys have worked hard to get to law school. You're spending a lot of money here. You have certain expectations. You're going to want a family. You're going to have, you're going to have obligations then. All that's fine. It doesn't mean the world just stops at your front door. There'll be somebody who didn't have your breaks. There'll be somebody who deserves some help from you. And it doesn't have to be full-time. If it's full-time, good luck. I didn't do it full-time intentionally. It just kind of happened. But I do think, and I mean it, I actually do think that those who are given more owe more. And there's a lot of ways to pay that back. So for me, it's been public service, but there's a million ways to do it. And honestly, think about it. I mean, if, at least in politics and government, if you don't do it, who the hell's going to do it? Someone with less training than you, less ability to make an argument, less ability to make those changes? You're in one of the best law schools in the country right now. Okay, what are you going to do with it? And if it's all about driving a Mercedes, well, first of all, you wouldn't be watching this, And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not poor. Poverty is not a wonderful option either. But there is a balance. So for me, I think it's, nobody listens to me and I don't blame them. But I will guarantee you, if you think I'm wrong, then tell me why Bill Gates is doing everything he can to give as much money as he possibly can away. Because it's fulfilling. Because it means something. There's only so much stuff you can have in the world. There's only so much stuff you need in the world. But to help others, to me, is gratifying. It means I've done something.
Congressman, it's great to have you here. We're proud of your association with this law school, and we hope to continue to do the work that we should do so that you can continue to be proud of us. So thank you for coming.